this person here essentially asks, that's actually a good point here, please describe or show something on how to determine snapshot dates using actual examples. Your previous video on this subject is not definitive and not very clear. What I get from this is how do you define a snapshot date essentially, how you do that. And typically what we have is, well, let's talk about the different timelines. And there's actually a class on multi-temporal data vault where this comes from more or less. There's 3 basic timelines in a data warehouse design, especially with data vault. One is this is essentially about 3 different perspectives. One is the data warehousing perspective. That's how you get data from the sources into your system, right? And that's all driven by the deliveries coming from the sources. And those deliveries are identified by a load date timestamp. So from a given source, for a given load date timestamp, you get a batch of data coming in. Could be a batch, could be a near real-time batch, could be a single real-time message. But you have always the identifier for the source and the load date timestamp, essentially. That's the basic idea. That identifies the incoming data that you have to warehouse. The second timeline is the snapshot timeline. And that's for the information delivery perspective. The basic idea is if I would be a user, I would expect that when I come to the office in the morning at, let's say, 9 o'clock, the reporting solution is ready to be used because I would like to pull some reports, make some decisions, that kind of stuff, right? So at 9 o'clock, all the reports are ready. That's the first challenge. I get that. The next challenge is I would like to have some stability. So even though you get some real-time data, I don't care. What I would like to have for this particular report is a daily update. So every time I come to the office at 9, I get a new report. But I don't get a change just because you get more data in real time or whatever, right? Which means that we want to decouple the data warehousing when you get data from the information delivery when you ship the information to the end user. We want to decouple that. And what we already see is that the end user has a requirement for a snapshot or for a delivery of information on a regular basis, every morning at 9 o'clock. So it's every day at 9 o'clock, for example. But then I could also argue for some other reports, I need an update every hour. And for some other reports, I need an update every 5 minutes or maybe every second for a real-time dashboard, right? So how often I want to get some new refreshed perspective or new data into my dashboard, that depends on my use case. Daily, hourly, 50 minutes, 5 minutes per second, that doesn't matter. Yeah, it's what it is. Now, so that's number one. And why don't we do this? Because I would like to run essentially queries. It's not just about dashboards. In the best case, I can query your data warehouse or data platform and get some results, right? So I'm directly querying your raw data vault, business vault, maybe some information mounts, whatever. Now, what I would like to expect, what I expect from you is that the query results, just like the reports, remain stable for a while, for a day, an hour, and so on. And I would like to actually define that per query. So this query gets refreshed query results once a day. This other query returns me refreshed data every 5 seconds. I want to define that in the best case on a per query basis. That's a perfect scenario. Now, why do we do this? Every morning at 9 o'clock, you take all your data, the whole data platform, freeze it into a snapshot and deliver it to me with some fanfare and so on, right? So you just hand it over to me so I can query this snapshot. It's not being modified, it's handed over essentially. And maybe we do the snapshot every hour, every 5 minutes, every second, right? Well, that becomes a problem sooner or later to freeze all your data. And that's why we only build PRT tables and bridge tables as indexes into your data. But the concept of the snapshot date, that remains. Whenever on a regular basis you hand over a snapshot to the end user so they can query this snapshot. That's the basic idea of the snapshot date timestamp. And this snapshot date timestamp is on a regular basis. Every morning at 9 o'clock, every hour, every 5 minutes, every second. That's when you generate a new snapshot timestamp. But it is independent from the delivery of the data because the load date timestamp is defined when the source system decides to send some new data at 2 o'clock in the morning. Or every couple of seconds, there comes a new real-time message, right? But it's defined by the source system. When they deliver data, you assign a load date to the incoming batch. While the snapshot date is defined by you, with help from the user, let's say, where the user essentially tells us how often they want to have an update on the reports. Every day, every 5 minutes, and so on. But it's on a regular basis. I know At Scalefree, we do our snapshot is defined at 7 o'clock in the morning UTC. So we're in Germany here, so it's 8 o'clock German time essentially. And so I know the next snapshot date, right? It's tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock UTC. That's what it is. So it's on a very regular basis. And if you would like to have, let's say, an hourly snapshot date timestamp. Let's say there's some users who would like to have an hourly snapshot date timestamp, and some users would like to have a daily snapshot timestamp. What we do typically is we load every hour one snapshot date timestamp into a control table. I'll talk about that in a minute. And then after a day, I don't need these hourly snapshot dates anymore. Or maybe after a couple of days, after a week. Sooner or later, I don't need these hourly snapshot dates anymore. Which means that I'm removing those, except if they are the 9 o'clock snapshot date timestamp. Or in our case, the 7 o'clock UTC timestamp. Depends on what you define as beginning of office day. But so you remove all of them except this one in the morning. That's what you keep for longer, for a year or whatever, right? So that's a very common scenario. And then if you're a user, now how do we use these snapshot date timestamps now? Well, first of all, we have a control table inside our data warehouse in client project as well. This control table is actually two control tables. One control table indicating which load date timestamps do we know from each source. So in other terms, which batches did we receive? Identified by the source identifier and the load date timestamp. That indicates the batch, and we always indicate where is this batch. That's what I want to know. Is it already in staging? Is it already in a raw data vault, in the business vault, in information vault? That's what the control table for load date timestamps indicates for us. And then we have a snapshot control table. And the snapshot control table is essentially where we insert on a regular basis, maybe with a scheduler, for example, one snapshot a day or every hour, every 5 minutes. We just insert those as rows with the snapshot date timestamp essentially as the primary key if you want, or at least some alternate key. And then you could also indicate, is this the daily snapshot at 9 o'clock? Is this an hourly snapshot, but not the daily one, right? Well, even the daily one is an hourly snapshot actually. Is this a 5-minute or a real-time snapshot date timestamp? So we have Boolean flags attached to this snapshot date, and then the user can typically, when you build a dimension, you select from the pit table, join the hub for the business key, join the satellites to describe the business key. That's your basic pattern for a dimension based on the pit table. Now the problem is, first of all, the pit table is also being loaded using the control table, because the control table tells us which snapshots should exist in every pit table. And if they're not there, we're loading those snapshots into the pit. So part of the pit loading process is to involve and include the control table to know what to load actually, right? That's number one. So the snapshot dates after loading in the morning are in sync with the snapshots between the pit table and the control table. And then when you query the system, when you query the pit table, you can now use the control table. I'm joining the control table based on the snapshot date timestamp. So I'm selecting from the pit. Pit includes the snapshot date timestamp. I join into the control table based on the snapshot date timestamp to get the other data. Is daily, is hourly, and so on. And that's what I can filter for. There's a flag for latest, for type 1 dimensions. So I can filter for that, give me the latest snapshot. And then we can also filter for is daily, is hourly, is real time. And that way I can filter my dimension down to a daily dimension, hourly dimension, and so on. That's the basic idea. That's how it works. And yeah, so that's the second timeline. And that's the question here. There's another time or multi-temporal perspective. And that's the business perspective, where we also have these business timelines. And that's every timeline coming from your source. Even the valid from date, 2 dates, contract start, end date, modified dates, all these timestamps coming from a source, we just consider as business timelines, and we just put them into some satellite or maybe some other, like some as non-historic links and so on, and we keep them there. We don't apply them, but it's another story for multi-temporal designs. So that's the snapshot dates. We define it on a regular basis, and typically using a control table, and then we use it for building the pit and bridge tables on a regular basis again, and hand over a snapshot of all your data platform essentially to the end user. That's a very basic idea essentially. Cool. Again, there's a training for that. If you go for this link here or search for multi-temporal data vault class at Scalefree, yeah, that's where you find, and all the topics we discuss essentially. Here you see the main topics. It's just much more than just these different timelines. It's the first part here that I discussed here today, to at least to some extent focus on the snapshot date. But that's only a bit of the action essentially. And get your free copy of this little book here. That's essentially a free book that you can essentially order, but also download. And yeah, hope to see you next Friday, 11 o'clock, same time, same place. And enjoy your weekend, guys.